Stay out of the way, Hale. Don't slow us down, Sergeant Marcus Danner barked, his voice sharp with the impatience of a man under fire. For weeks, Cassandra Hale had been nothing more than dead weight in their eyes. A quiet analyst clutching her tablet, stumbling to keep up, someone to be tolerated but never trusted. Yet when the dust storm cleared and the gunfire grew closer, everything changed. The squad thought the helicopter had come to save them, but it didn't land at their position. It landed right in front of Cassandra Hale, the analyst they'd mocked and ignored. In that instant, the woman they told to stay out of the way stood tall, transformed before their eyes. Who was she really? And why did an elite extraction team risk everything for her? The desert was unforgiving. Dust swirled in endless waves, choking the lungs and burning the eyes. Gunfire cracked in the distance, like the relentless ticking of a clock running out of time. Sergeant Marcus Danner's squad was pinned down, weary from hours of skirmishes and desperate for extraction. Behind broken walls and scattered debris, they crouched low, conserving their last magazines of ammunition. Hope, at that moment, felt as scarce as the water in their canteens. Among the battered soldiers was one figure who didn't seem to belong. Dr. Cassandra Hale, a civilian analyst embedded with the unit, huddled slightly apart. She wasn't like the others. No battle-worn armor, no hardened stare, no scars from countless firefights. Instead, she clutched a rugged tablet against her chest as if it were her only weapon. Her uniform was standard issue, plain and untouched by the customizations soldiers often added. No patches of pride, no marks of history. To the squad, she was an outsider, tolerated because command had forced her into their ranks. Danner made no secret of how he felt. "Stay out of the way, Hale. Don't slow us down," he barked, his voice sharp and laced with impatience. He was a man who carried the weight of 3 tours, who had buried too many friends because of bad intelligence. In his mind, analysts like her belonged behind computer screens in air-conditioned rooms, not out here in the dust where decisions meant life or death. Every time Cassandra tried to offer input, whether pointing at satellite imagery or suggesting safer routes, Danner waved her off. To him, she was just another burden to carry, another liability that could cost them all their lives. The squad absorbed his tone. Soldiers who had once greeted her politely now barely glanced in her direction. They loaded their rifles, checked their sights, and ignored the woman in their midst. She wasn't one of them. She wasn't a fighter. She was background noise in a symphony of survival. But Cassandra never argued back. She didn't shout, didn't try to prove herself by force. Instead, she observed. Her eyes, calm, steady, searching, moved from terrain to horizon, from broken radios to enemy signals, faintly flickering across her tablet's encrypted feed. She kept her silence, carrying the weight of invisibility with quiet dignity. To the squad, that silence was weakness. In truth, it was focus. This is where the story takes its root, in the tension between appearance and reality. The opening image of Cassandra Hale, dismissed, mocked, and told to stand aside, is not just a military anecdote. It is a mirror of the way life often treats those who work in silence. In every office, in every community, there are people like Cassandra, individuals who are overlooked because they don't clamor for attention, who are mocked because they don't wear their strength like armor. We live in a world that often rewards the loudest voice, the boldest posture, the one who pushes to the front of the line. But hidden within the quiet are reservoirs of value, knowledge, resilience, clarity, that only reveal themselves when circumstances demand it. The squad could not see Cassandra's worth because they had defined value too narrowly. To them, usefulness meant firepower, toughness, or the ability to charge into the fray. But sometimes the greatest strength is carried in silence, in the discipline to watch when others rush, in the courage to endure dismissal without letting it corrode your purpose. Cassandra Hale was the analyst nobody wanted. She was the dust carried at the margins, the shadow in the background, the weight everyone thought they bore. Yet the irony of this beginning is clear. In moments of despair, it is often the overlooked who change the course of events. The briefing room was a dimly lit space inside a crumbling outpost, its walls cracked and scarred from years of conflict. Maps, satellite images, and hastily scribbled notes covered a large wooden table at the center. The squad gathered around, their rifles propped against the wall, helmets resting by their boots. Despite the fatigue in their faces, a current of anticipation flowed in the room. This was the kind of moment they were trained for. A mission laid out, a target defined, a chance to prove their effectiveness once again. Sergeant Marcus Danner stood at the head of the table, posture commanding, voice sharp and steady. He tapped at a satellite photo, his finger jabbing at the dark outline of a compound nestled in the foothills. Intel says unusual activity here. Possible high-value targets. We insert under cover of darkness, establish observation, confirm, then extract before dawn. His words carried the weight of certainty, the kind that makes soldiers nod without hesitation. Danner wasn't just presenting a plan. He was asserting dominance, a leader who had survived enough battles to believe his instincts were law. Cassandra Hale slipped into the room quietly, clutching her tablet as she found a spot near the edge of the table. Unlike the soldiers with their relaxed swagger and hardened presence, she seemed careful in every movement, controlled, deliberate. She didn't interrupt, didn't announce herself. She simply listened. Her eyes traced the map, but not with the same bravado as the others. Instead of focusing on the main target, she scanned the ridges, the valleys, the faint outlines of patrol routes visible in the imagery. When Danner finished outlining the primary route of insertion, Cassandra cleared her throat softly. "Sergeant," she began, her voice measured but steady, "satellite thermal imaging shows consistent patrols along this ridge." She pointed toward the eastern approach, her tablet highlighting faint heat signatures. "If you move this way, you'll encounter less resistance. Their western perimeter is denser, with higher thermal activity." The squad exchanged quick glances. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others smirked as if amused that the Pentagon babysitter had dared to interject. Danner froze for a moment, then turned slowly to face her. His expression was unreadable, though the tension in his jaw betrayed irritation. "We've run dozens of these ops, Hale. Observation posts go here." He tapped the western ridge again, harder this time, as though force alone could silence doubt. "Your numbers don't change the fact that this is the high ground. We stick to the plan." Cassandra didn't push further. She simply nodded, withdrawing her hand, though the faint flicker of concern in her eyes lingered. She wasn't wrong. The data was there, clear for anyone willing to look. But in that room, confidence drowned out caution. To question Danner was to question the bedrock of his authority, and no one dared side with the quiet analyst over the seasoned sergeant. The squad dispersed after the briefing, joking among themselves, their energy high from the surge of impending action. Cassandra remained behind a moment longer, studying the imagery on her screen. Her expression was calm, but behind it lay a sharp unease. She had seen enough patterns, enough inconsistencies to know that the mission as outlined carried risk far greater than Danner acknowledged. This moment captures more than just a clash of personalities. It illustrates a universal trap, the danger of overconfidence in leadership. Danner's certainty gave his men assurance, but it also blinded them. His experience, his past victories, became armor so thick that no new information could penetrate. He mistook confidence for accuracy, authority for truth. Cassandra, on the other hand, embodied the opposite approach. She was cautious, analytical, unwilling to claim certainty without evidence. Her strength lay in precision, in noticing the overlooked details that could shift an outcome. But in a culture where volume often outweighs validity, her voice was lost. This is a problem that extends far beyond the battlefield. In boardrooms, in classrooms, in families, leaders who project certainty often gain unquestioned authority. Yet confidence does not equal competence. A charismatic manager can lead a team into failure just as easily as a general can lead soldiers into an ambush. The tragedy lies in how rarely we recognize it until it's too late. The mission briefing is a warning that leadership without humility courts disaster. The ability to listen, to adapt, to admit the possibility of error. These are the qualities that prevent catastrophe. And yet, as we see with Cassandra Hale, the quiet wisdom of the cautious is so often dismissed, silenced beneath the weight of certainty. The night had barely begun when the squad realized they were walking into more than just a reconnaissance mission. The air was thick with dust, moonlight cutting faint silver lines across broken rooftops. As they crept into the outskirts of a deserted village, silence shattered. Gunfire erupted from every direction, tracer rounds streaking like red lightning across the dark. The enemy had been waiting. "Contact! Take cover!" Danner barked, his voice booming over the chaos. The squad scattered into crumbling houses, returning fire in bursts. But the more they fought, the clearer it became. The enemy knew their every move. Each retreat was met by gunmen positioned perfectly to cut them off. Radio calls for support fizzled with heavy static, the comms jammed by interference patterns unfamiliar to even the veterans. Inside one shattered building, Private Jensen cried out as a bullet tore into his thigh. He collapsed against a wall, blood seeping through his field dressing. Ammunition was running low. Every magazine spent was a reminder that survival was slipping further away. Desperation echoed in each command, in every nervous glance exchanged between soldiers who had seen too much war to believe in miracles. And then there was Cassandra Hale. While the others shouted, fired, and scrambled for cover, she worked in silence. Kneeling beside Jensen, she pressed firm, steady hands on his wound, guiding his trembling fingers to hold pressure where it mattered most. Her movements were precise, almost practiced, as though she had done this countless times before. "Hold here," she instructed calmly, voice low but unwavering. Jensen obeyed, the pain momentarily tempered by her composure. She didn't stay with him long. Within moments, Cassandra was back with her tablet, fingers moving in a blur across encrypted signals she had intercepted. Her face glowed faintly in the blue light of the screen, eyes narrowing as she pieced together fragments of enemy chatter. "They're coordinating reinforcements from the north," she murmured, almost to herself. 30 minutes, maybe less, before they close the circle." Sergeant Danner overheard, snapping toward her. "What are you talking about? That's classified intercept work. You shouldn't even—" But his words faltered as another volley of gunfire ripped through the walls, forcing him back to cover. He didn't have time to argue, and Cassandra didn't seek his approval. She simply kept working, absorbing the patterns in their enemy's rhythm, mapping possibilities in her mind with each burst of radio static. The squad noticed her in fragments. Rhodes, pinned behind a collapsed archway, saw the calm way she moved despite bullets cracking overhead. Zephyr, firing short bursts from the window, caught the steady rhythm in her breathing, in contrast to the frantic gasps around him. And Jensen, clutching his thigh wound, felt his panic ease, not because of morphine or promises, but because of the quiet steadiness of her hands. Minutes crawled into eternity. Their ammunition dwindled to a handful of rounds. Their hope thinned like the smoke filling the night sky. And yet, amid the chaos, Cassandra's stillness became its own kind of command. She wasn't leading with shouts or bravado. She was guiding with observation, with an intelligence that required no announcement. Crises have a way of stripping illusions. Under fire, titles lose weight, and confidence without substance shatters. What remains is competence, often found in the least expected places. Cassandra Hale, the analyst dismissed as a burden, revealed her strength not by grand gestures, but by actions so quiet they could have been overlooked. Pressing a hand to a wound, translating fragments of radio chatter, calculating reinforcements before they arrived. This is the paradox of silent skill. It rarely shines until the world begins to collapse. We are conditioned to equate leadership with volume, to mistake noise for direction, but true resilience often speaks in whispers. In the steady hand during panic, the calm mind when everything else frays. The ambush in the village reminds us that survival isn't always secured by the loudest orders, but by those who can see what others miss. Cassandra's gift was not only in knowledge but in restraint. She did not demand to be heard. She waited until reality itself made her impossible to ignore. In life, as in battle, the underestimated often carry the tools of salvation, and sometimes it takes the crucible of fire to reveal the power of quiet observation, the strength of skills forged away from the spotlight. The night sky trembled with the distant thump of rotor blades. At first it was faint, hidden beneath the rattle of gunfire and the cracking of ruined walls. But as the sound grew louder, hope ignited across the squad like a spark on dry tinder. "Extraction!" Zephyr shouted, his exhausted face lifting into a grin. Even Danner, hardened by suspicion and bitterness, felt his chest loosen. Relief was a luxury he rarely allowed himself, yet in that moment, the beat of the helicopter promised salvation. The soldiers scrambled to the windows, eyes scanning the haze for the familiar silhouette. And then they saw it, a dark shape cutting through dust and tracer fire, blades carving the sky with thunderous rhythm. For the first time that night, the squad felt they might survive. But then confusion crept in. The helicopter didn't angle toward the designated landing zone, the one marked on their maps half a kilometer southeast. Instead, it banked sharply, lowering its nose as it descended into the heart of the village. Its floodlights cut across the courtyard directly behind their crumbling shelter, exactly where Cassandra Hale was positioned. "What the?" Rhodes muttered, disbelief in his voice. Danner grabbed his binoculars, jaw tightening. "That's not protocol," he snapped. His tone was sharp, but beneath it lay a tremor of unease. "Stay sharp. Could be hostile." Yet before he could give another order, the helicopter touched down. Dust exploded outward in violent gusts, the downwash sending debris spinning through the air. Cassandra stood in the center of the storm, hair whipped across her face, her small frame illuminated by the harsh glare of the landing lights. The squad shouted at her, waving frantically. "Hale, get down! You'll get yourself killed!" But she didn't duck. She didn't stumble. Instead, she straightened. For weeks, she had carried herself as though apologizing for existing. Shoulders hunched, eyes lowered, voice hesitant. Now in the roar of the helicopter, Cassandra's posture shifted. She stood tall, her movements precise, stripped of hesitation. With calm confidence, she reached into her boot and drew out a concealed device, flashing coded light signals toward the open side door. From within, a figure appeared, an operator in full tactical gear, bearded and battle-scarred. He tossed her a vest and weapon, which she caught and donned with practiced speed. There was no fumbling, no uncertainty. The transformation was instant, as if the timid analyst had shed a disguise. The squad stared in shock. Rhodes whispered, "What the hell is happening?" Cassandra ignored them. She adjusted the weapon with familiarity, then turned back toward the soldiers she had shadowed for weeks. Her voice, once quiet and cautious, now carried across the courtyard with unmistakable authority. "Cover your sectors. We move on my signal." The men froze. For a heartbeat, none of them obeyed. They were too busy reconciling the sight before them. The woman they had dismissed as dead weight now issuing commands with the tone of someone who had done it 100 times. Even Danner, who had barked at her every step of the way, found himself instinctively shifting his rifle in compliance. It was a revelation, a mask torn away, a truth exposed not by words but by action. Cassandra Hale was no mere analyst. She had been someone else all along, someone far more dangerous and capable than any of them imagined. The descent of the helicopter and Cassandra's transformation serve as more than just a dramatic twist in a battlefield story. They form a powerful metaphor about the masks we wear. Every day, people move through the world carrying facades of weakness, of ordinariness, of compliance, when beneath lies strength waiting for its moment. Cassandra's mask was deliberate. She hid her identity, her skill, to protect the secrecy of her mission. But in doing so, she also revealed a universal truth. Society often underestimates those who do not announce themselves. We assume quietness equals passivity, caution equals incompetence. We misread humility as weakness. And yet, when the mask finally falls, the revelation can be overwhelming. The chopper that landed for Cassandra was not just a tactical extraction, it was a symbol, a reminder that true power often works in silence, wearing disguises until the moment demands revelation. In life, as in war, never assume you know the measure of someone's worth by the face they choose to show. The courtyard was still glowing with the faint embers of fire. Smoke drifted lazily upward as the last echoes of gunfire faded into silence. The squad, battered and exhausted, huddled together, watching the scene unfold with disbelief. The helicopter loomed like a guardian beast behind Cassandra Hale, its rotors slowing, but still slicing the air with rhythmic menace. Dust swirled in circles around her boots, as if the earth itself acknowledged her transformation. For the first time since the operation began, nobody spoke. Their breaths came heavy, their rifles sagging in tired hands. Every pair of eyes was fixed on the woman who had once been nothing more than the analyst. Then the bearded operator from the helicopter stepped forward. He moved with a calm authority, his weapon hanging but ready, his eyes sharp. "Sergeant Danner," he called, his voice carrying easily over the fading thrum of blades. "Your squad has completed its role." "Our role?" Danner spat back, shoulders squared despite his fatigue. "We just bled men out here. We were supposed to recon that compound, hold long enough for extraction. Don't tell me this was some sideshow." The operator's expression didn't flinch. Instead, he gestured to Cassandra. "It wasn't a sideshow, Sergeant. It was the shield. She was the blade." Confusion rippled through the squad. Rhodes frowned. Jensen, pale from blood loss, tried to prop himself higher, his eyes wide. "What does he mean?" Cassandra took a slow step forward. No longer timid, no longer shrinking into corners, her voice rang with clarity. "Your mission was cover. While the enemy focused on your squad, while they intercepted your movements and thought they'd cornered you, I had the access I needed to disable their early warning systems and infiltrate their comms network. Without your presence, they would never have exposed their hand. Without you, my mission fails." The words stung. Zephyr muttered, "So we were bait." Cassandra's gaze swept over them, calm, deliberate. "No, you were protection. Every firefight you fought, every building you held, bought me minutes. Minutes I needed to break through firewalls, to identify nodes that have been invisible for years. You carried the weight so I could reach the heart of what we came here for." Danner's jaw clenched. His voice dropped, edged with anger. "And who are you to tell us what we came here for? Who the hell are you, really?" The operator answered before she could. "Commander Cassandra Hale, Spectre Division, Naval Intelligence." The words hit the squad harder than any gunfire. Spectre Division. The name lived only in rumor, an intelligence program so classified that soldiers joked it was a ghost story told to keep rookies sharp. Whispers of operatives who never appeared on rosters, whose missions were never declassified, who wore faces of nobodies until the moment came to act. And here she was, Commander Cassandra Hale. The silence that followed was suffocating. Rhodes stared at the ground. Zephyr rubbed his forehead like a man trying to wake from a dream. Even the wounded Jensen whispered, almost in awe, "Commander." Danner looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he saw the weight in her eyes. Not arrogance, not triumph, but gravity. She had carried their contempt without protest, endured their mockery, and let them believe she was useless, all because the mission demanded it. "You lied to us," Danner said finally, his tone caught between accusation and respect. "I did," Cassandra replied evenly, "because secrecy was survival. The fewer who knew the truth, the greater the chance of success. Your frustration with me, your dismissal of my presence, it was my best cover. It convinced the enemy that I was just what you thought I was, a burden. And while they underestimated me, I broke into their network." Her words cut sharper than any reprimand. The squad had treated her like excess weight, and in doing so, they had unknowingly played their roles perfectly. She turned to Jensen, crouching to check his bandage again. "I never intended for any of you to be hurt. Every casualty is a cost I carry. I know what I asked of you, even if you didn't know it yourselves." The squad didn't reply, but something shifted. For the first time, they saw her as both the analyst they had dismissed and the commander she truly was. She had lived two lives in front of them, one false, one hidden, and both had demanded sacrifice. The revelation of Cassandra Hale's true identity was more than a dramatic twist. It exposed the deeper meaning of leadership and loyalty. Leadership isn't always about standing tall or giving orders. Sometimes it's choosing to be underestimated, accepting scorn, and even sacrificing trust to protect the mission. Cassandra carried that burden, surrendering her dignity and reputation so her team could succeed. Her loyalty was never to pride, but to the lives that depended on her silence. This is the essence of true command: to bear blame, to be misunderstood, and still remain faithful to a greater purpose. The squad would leave that night changed, realizing that strength in leadership is often hidden, not in being seen, but in being willing to disappear so that others may live. The days following the extraction blurred into a haze of debriefings, reports, and the sterile routines of military bureaucracy. For Sergeant Marcus Danner and his squad, it was an exhausting return to normal, except nothing felt normal anymore. On official paperwork, the mission was recorded as a reconnaissance operation compromised by unexpected resistance. The squad's endurance was praised, their survival credited to discipline and grit. Cassandra Hale's name, however, was conspicuously absent. In the final report, the line was cold and simple. Intelligence analyst Cassandra Hale, missing in action, presumed lost during withdrawal. The squad read the words in silence. Rhodes muttered under his breath, "Presumed lost? That's it?" Zephyr closed his eyes, shaking his head. Jensen, still recovering from his leg wound, clenched the paper until it crumpled in his hands. To them, it felt like a betrayal, reducing everything they had witnessed to a footnote, erasing the truth of the woman who had carried them through the storm. But Cassandra was not lost. Even as her death was recorded, she continued her work, operating in the shadows of the Spectre Division. Somewhere far from the airfield where Danner's squad tried to heal, she was already dismantling networks, slipping between layers of secrecy that most soldiers would never even glimpse. For her, invisibility was survival. Being gone was the price of being useful. Marcus Danner carried that knowledge with a heavy heart. He had not been told much, only fragments whispered by the operator who had stood at Cassandra's side during the extraction. Enough to know she lived. Enough to know she would never return to them as Cassandra Hale, the clumsy analyst they had mocked. She was gone in one sense, but still fighting in another. One evening, weeks later, Danner sat alone outside the barracks. The desert night stretched wide and silent, stars scattered like fragments of broken glass across the sky. He remembered her face, not the timid mask she had worn for weeks, but the steady resolve in her eyes as she stood before the helicopter, commanding soldiers like she had been born to it. He whispered into the stillness, words meant for himself more than anyone else. You never really know who someone is until you see them under fire. It was a confession and a lesson. He had judged her by appearances, by assumptions built on his own bitterness and scars. And in doing so, he had nearly missed the truth of who she was. Not a burden, not a liability, but the very reason they survived. The aftermath of Cassandra Hale's revelation is more than a military footnote. It is a mirror held up to how we view others in our own lives. Too often, people are measured by surface impressions, how loudly they speak, how confident they appear, how easily they fit into roles we already understand. Quietness is mistaken for weakness, hesitation for incompetence. Yet true character reveals itself under pressure. Cassandra's mask of uncertainty had concealed resilience, brilliance, and command. In dismissing her, the squad demonstrated a mistake we all make, judging worth by appearances instead of substance. Humility is the antidote to this error. Danner's reflection reminds us that leadership, strength, and courage often come from unexpected places. To be humble is to leave space for surprise, to accept that the person beside you, however ordinary they may seem, may carry extraordinary strength. The official record said Cassandra Hale was gone, but for Danner and his squad, she would never be forgotten. They had seen her true face in the fire, and they carried with them a lesson etched deeper than any medal or citation. Never underestimate the quiet, never dismiss the unseen, and never assume you know someone until the moment comes when everything is on the line. The story of Cassandra Hale may have unfolded on a battlefield, but its lessons belong to everyday life. Most of us will never crouch behind a crumbling wall under enemy fire, yet we all know what it means to be overlooked, or to overlook someone else. In today's America, we often praise the loudest voice in the room, the one who commands attention. But just as often, real strength is found in quieter places. Think of the nurse working through the night without complaint, the grandfather raising his grandkids on a fixed income, or the neighbor who checks in on a veteran down the street. These people don't wear uniforms or receive medals, but they carry weight that keeps families, workplaces, and communities alive. Cassandra's story is their story. For weeks, she was dismissed as weak, only to reveal she was the one holding everything together. Her mask of fragility was her greatest disguise, and her silence became her shield. The squad judged her by appearances, and they were wrong. How often do we do the same in our daily lives? We misjudge coworkers who don't speak up. We underestimate family members who sacrifice quietly, and we forget that heroes don't always stand in the spotlight. True leadership, as Cassandra showed, is not about recognition. It is about responsibility. She accepted misunderstanding, even contempt, because the mission mattered more than her pride. That is the deeper definition of loyalty, staying faithful to a purpose greater than yourself, even if no one ever knows your name. This is where her story touches ours. Who are the Cassandra Hales around you? Is it the teacher who stayed after class to help when no one else noticed? The parent who worked two jobs so their children could dream bigger? Or maybe it's someone in your life right now, quietly holding things together without recognition. I want to ask you, what would change if we noticed these people before the crisis, instead of after? What if we learned to look past appearances and honor the strength hidden in humility? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own experiences in the comments. Tell us about the quiet hero you've known, or the moment you realized someone's true strength only when life put them under pressure. Your story may remind someone else to look more carefully at the people around them. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If this message resonated with you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend or family member who needs encouragement. Stories like Cassandra's are not just entertainment. They are reminders of the values that hold us together: humility, loyalty, and unseen courage. And perhaps the truest reminder of all is this: don't judge by appearances. Real heroes rarely boast. They simply act, quietly and exactly when it matters most.